history is not lost on these four astronauts. They try to make this about the mission itself. We actually heard from one of them who talked about being the first African-American to go to space. Here is some of what he shared with CNN.
That's awesome. And that young brown boys and girls can look at me and go, hey, he looks like me and he's doing what? And that's great. I love that. But I also hope we are pushing the other direction, that one day we don't have to talk about these first, that one day this is just, and I listen to this, that this is the human history. It's about human history. It's the story of humanity, not black history, not women's history, but that it becomes human history.
So I do regret to bring you this information because I don't want to ruin the Artemis launch for anyone. This is objectively a very inspiring and exciting moment for our civilization. However, it is simply true that the worst people you know are currently trying to wokeify the rocket launch. That's right. They're figuratively trying to blast their gay race communism out into space. Although you could make the argument it really does belong up there with the aliens and better have it there than here on planet Earth, you know. But no, this is indeed what is actually happening. I mean, on one hand, we have a bunch of leftists who are attempting to turn Artemis into some type of diversity statement. On the other hand, there's a bunch of them arguing, oh, this is stupid. Why are you going into space? Don't you know with that money you could feed the poor or something like that? Which is really, as we know, based on recent political circumstances, code words for saying, how dare you spend tax dollars on something objectively good rather than a bunch of Somali fraudsters, EBT welfare grifters, all of those things, right? So to which I say, yeah, I would much rather actually my tax dollars be going into conquering the stars than allowing people to, basically set up quality leering centers. Yeah, I know, very controversial take. And then lastly, we even have some woke lunatics here who are trying to argue that what America's currently doing in space is a bad form of imperialism or something like that, right? They're accusing this of being a lunar land grab. It's something to benefit only the rich. And by the way, I'm not even making this up. They're even further arguing that it is disrespectful to native, aka as they call them, indigenous peoples to be basically colonizing the moon, which Artemis is supposed to be the first step in doing. So yeah, these people are crazy. These people are ridiculous. However, if you know anything about the history of the politics around the American space program, this is nothing new. Actually, leftists and communists in America have always opposed space travel. As a matter of fact, back in the 1960s, they used to launch the same exact protests arguing, why are you spending money on NASA? You should be spending it on our welfare programs instead, right? Same thing. This has not changed. As a matter of fact, if you research the origins of the whole moon landing conspiracy, you actually find that thing as well. It was started by race communists and black activists in America who basically tried to argue that it was impossible that the white man could have done this, right? It's literally just leftist resentment after, watching exceptional people do exceptional things while they want to drag America into mediocrity because they're mediocre people. Same dynamic, frankly, we are watching here today, but still nonetheless, what is happening? That rocket is shooting off anyway. The country, our civilization is prevailing over these idiots because, as a matter of fact, they've even been trying to ask some of our astronauts about this very question, right? Because there's a black astronaut on the rocket, and they're trying to make, oh yay, DEI, and he actually shut down the media's stupid nonsense, which is kind of hilarious. So anyways, we'll tell you about all of this. Again, how leftists are trying to wokeify the moon. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, if you don't believe me, I mean, just take a listen to how much the media is trying to make this into, oh, don't you know there's a black man on the rocket ship? So take a listen.
Yeah, and they are going for all humanity this time, Apollo was all white men, and this time it's not. And I think that really speaks volumes for the journey that NASA has been on. And this is a much more representative crew. And you can feel emotional about that.
Oh boy, here we go. So yeah, according to Sky News, okay, and this is the statement they want to make, but from Artemis. Not, oh, how cool is it that America's finally going back to the moon? And by the way, what a disgrace it was that our space program, because of literal DEI policies, actually, when you research the reason this all happened, with how disgraceful it was that it declined so much, and how inspiring it is that we're finally back. And their big conclusion is, no, no, no. Don't you know? This is the actual history of the American space program. It's not that we went to the moon because America was exceptional and some awesome, smart, brilliant guys put it all together. No, no, no. It didn't represent all of humanity because it was just white men on the Apollo program. To which I say, you know, have you considered the fact maybe that America still is today, but especially back then was a majority white country? And simply the smartest, most qualified people became the astronauts. I know, whoa, you can't say that. No, actually, it's just the reality, right? Like, yeah, objectively, a bunch of white men built the space program. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But anyways, no, but I love this part of the logic. According to them, it didn't represent all of humanity back then because it was all the white guys who, by the way, like literally built the technology. But, you know, I'm sure the Netflix version is going to say that a black lesbian actually built the rocket or something. But anyways, right? But now apparently it does represent all of humanity simply because there's a black guy on the rocket. It's like, is that all of humanity? All of humanity is white American men, a white American woman, and a black American. That's all it is. Where's the Asians, huh? Where's my Hey, I want to go to a space. Let me see a rocket. Like, what? Again, what does that even mean? It's not, now suddenly it represents all of humanity, which, by the way, I would argue it doesn't, okay? I know that space travel is supposed to be this like collectivist humanist thing, but let's be real about this. Only a handful of countries on this planet have ever gone to space. We are one of them. We should be proud of that. And I don't see how some random person in Botswana or Zimbabwe gets to take credit, or, you know, it can be inspired by it. You can think it's cool, but no, actually, like, this is an American thing. I'm sorry. It is an American thing. And we're going to take pride in that. But, you know, this is what they're trying to do. So anyways, you have that. Again, the logic, it now suddenly represents all of humanity because a black guy is there. It's like, black people are 12% of the U.S. population. There's no Latino on there. There's no Asian. There's no Middle Easterner. But look, there's a black guy. So that's all of humanity. So stupid. So like, if you're going to racialize it, it's still technically is not that diverse of a mission, but nonetheless, okay. So we're seeing that talking point on one hand. You have some libs basically trying to just celebrate the diversity angle. Of course, we're seeing a lot of this as well, right? A reminder as you watch the Artemis launch. We, the taxpayer, funded this $100 billion fireworks show. And yeah, you're watching a bunch of, frankly, losers post stuff like this right here. Oh, the American empire paid for with your tax money. Can you believe it? Aren't you so upset that your tax dollars went to literally the coolest thing ever, right? Aren't you upset that you're paying for your country and your civilization to conquer the stars? No, actually, I don't have a problem with that. As a matter of fact, you know, I would argue that space exploration is actually really important for a number of reasons. And first and foremost, I know maybe this is considered overrated or it doesn't matter, but I honestly do believe that the concept of national morale in itself really does matter, right? How we view our country, how we view our civilization. And you could argue there's no greater symbol of America's decline over the past several decades than what happened with the space program, right? Like, we went to the moon. It was the coolest thing ever. People were really proud of this country. People were proud. But it doesn't just say, oh, we're proud we did that. Also, right, the very metaphor of us shooting into space also says what? Like, we have a future, understand? You know, there is something greater that we are striving to as a country. We're not going to just sit around and, you know, dwell in mediocrity. We're not going to contract and collapse. We are growing. We are rising, right? This project called the United States of America is just beginning. People can say that's a moral high horse. People can say you're just preaching or that's not real, that's not tangible. I'm sorry, but it is. It just is, right? And if you don't get that, then I don't know what to tell you. You don't get it. But yeah, there is something like very important to our country to watch. Hey, yeah, we're conquering the stars. Yeah, that rocket ship just went up in the sky, okay? And this is back. The space program is back. America literally, like not figuratively, quite literally reaching for the stars. It's going to happen again. This is the past several decades of this demoralization and the constant just slop, the national decline. It's over. Like that's what, when I look at this rocket, that's what I see. And that's what a lot of people see, which is why it makes perfect sense that the very characters who love America's decline, they love to celebrate it. They want to import the third world, become the third world. They enjoy mediocrity. They worship that concept, as a matter of fact, and it's called DEI, aka the political left and some of their spiritual brothers who call themselves libertarians saying very similar stuff. That's the exact reason, literally, why they don't get the space travel thing and why they oppose it. And as I hinted at in the beginning, right, this is no different than what leftists did in the 1960s. You heard a lot of the same arguments. Oh, you could feed the poor or something. And by the way, I'm well familiar with the fact a lot of conservatives love to believe the whole moon landing conspiracy. Get that out of your head immediately, okay? Like, no, actually, we did go to the moon, all right? And please ask yourself, why is this idea so mainstream? Why is this core anti-American propaganda, right? This idea, oh, they couldn't do it. And then now understanding the origins of it. Yeah, it was literally a resentful talking point developed by race communists and stuff like that. Oh, the white man couldn't, go to the moon or something. Put that all together to consider, maybe there is a force, there are a bunch of demoralization actors out there, right? You want to talk about psyops, like this is the psyop. The psyop is literally that they don't want Americans to be proud of their country. They don't want Americans to believe that their country is capable of doing great and wonderful and exceptional and mind-blowing things anymore, right? And that's why they ask you to worship this mediocrity. No, we don't need a space program. That's just wasteful or something. No, the moon landing was fake, all this garbage. America could never do that. Actually, we can, though. Actually, we can. And we never lost the ability. We just started to worship the cult of mediocrity, and these people unironically are very upset that we're no longer doing that. And that's what this rocket launch represents as a country, okay? Again, if you think I just sound crazy, then I don't know what to tell you. You don't get it. You don't get it. One day you will. One day you will, though, okay? But of course, I'm bringing this all up because, as you know, they're basically making the case that, well, what about the welfare programs we should pay for? What about the hungry or something like that? To which I, first of all, point out, again, we're going to repeat this. When leftists say feeding the poor or infrastructure, what they literally just mean is mass fraud, okay, money laundering. So they're basically upset that our tax dollars are going to something that actually yields a result, such as a rocket launching off the ground and not, the Quality Learning Center. So, these people can shut the heck up. But anyways, even that aside, you notice the difference here, right? NASA's funding is $24 billion. America already spends $142 billion on food stamps, on the SNAP program alone. As you can tell, doesn't seem to have done a great job of lifting people out of poverty, has it, right? Why is that? Because, a lot of the system is just fraud. It's purposeful welfare delinquency. It's people buying votes. And essentially, again, the left is really mad that we're using tax dollars for something that is much more useful, I would argue, than the American SNAP program. It really is that simple. I think this guy puts it quite well. Anti-space sentiment is just third worldism, which is true, by the way. They join our political discourse. A lot of them don't even live in the United States, let's be honest, on social media. And they start just spewing this crap about, oh, space travel is bad because this and that. Have you considered maybe it's just jealousy? Maybe it's just resentment? And the answer is, of course, that it is. But anyways, the favela dwellers' hatred of accomplishment and greatness. 50 cents of every $100 you pay in taxes goes to NASA, which is the coolest thing the government does. I agree, right? The Apollo missions produce $14 in economic activity for every $1 spent on the mission, and we'll talk about that at some point. But anyways, by contrast, about $20 of that $100 will go to Social Security, meaning you're paying for someone else's retirement. About another $20 will go to welfare of various sorts, from crab legs for felons, aka SNAP, to Medicaid, which is, yes, stolen by foreigners on a grand scale. And we repeat, this is what leftists are saying would be a better use of tax dollars than NASA or the space program. Yeah, screw that, okay? Bite me, literally. But anyways, NASA is the least of our concerns from a tax and cost perspective, and that's correct. That's correct. Again, these people just suddenly whine about fiscal conservatism because, the tax dollars in this case are not going to their stupid, idiotic pet projects. Instead, they're going to things that are objectively much better for the psyche of the United States. And on that point, it is worth noting, yes, that the space program in the 1960s actually generated massive economic gains for America, largely thanks to the technology that was developed in order to go to space, right? Many people may know this from school or something, but let's remind ourselves, a big reason nowadays we have computers that are, the size of an arm. The reason why we have smartphones is because of the fact that in order to go to space, we had to figure out a way to make computers smaller so they can fit on the ship, right? So instead of these big giant things that took up auditoriums, how do we start making basically microchips? And that was the start of that, right? So to pretend as if there's no return on investment from space, not just in terms of what it does for national morale, but also tangible economic gain is ridiculous. As physicist Brian Cox had noted, for every $1 spent on the Apollo program, $14 made its way back into the economy. The Space Task Group program would have been a more effective anti-poverty program than anything the political class dreamed up, which is really interesting, by the way, right? A very effective anti-poverty program. So then why did effectively, and this is, we repeat, true with the history of NASA, why did a bunch of leftists effectively kill the space program? Could it be because it would have actually solved a lot of problems for America? And these people take power by grifting off of those very problems, such as, oh, don't you need more food stamps this year or something, right? Yeah, really interesting. Imagine the economic effects that the extra spending on space exploration would have caused. By throwing away what was won during the Apollo program, the United States lost what would have been a glorious last third of the 20th century, filled with prosperity, scientific discoveries, and a better standing in the world. Yes, that is the definition of a tragedy. And then, of course, we have to talk about this Canadian magazine and newspaper called The Walrus, okay? They wrote the following, saying, quote, "The moon has long been a shared locus of imagination and significance for indigenous peoples." All right, here we go. Here we go. The Native Americans thought the moon was so cool. Now, surely, right? No other culture in history, in prehistory and ancient history, looked up at the moon and was fascinated. No. Or, by the way, noticed that the moon was very relevant for things like the crop harvest and the weather and all that. No. It was only the indigenous guys. And by colonizing the moon, America and Canada are really damaging indigenous cultures. It's so disrespectful. Ooh, get the pipe or something, right? With the return of lunar missions, it is now a frontier for industry. Writer Michelle Sika explores the economic and colonial logics shaping this transformation. As you can say, there's just colonialism that we're clearly doing here. And they said, with the Artemis 2 mission, the lunar land grab begins. The moon once belonged to everyone. Well, I don't know, when did it ever belong to everyone? There's only one country that ever landed a man on the moon. And I think, I'm sure some other countries sent some rovers or something. But, in general, not a lot of countries have been to the moon. Since when does it ever belong to anyone, right? America's flag was there first. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, it belongs to the indigenous LGBT activists. Okay, then why don't they go to space and claim the moon? Oh, they can't. They can't, right? But I guess what they're claiming here is our future missions have to have equity or some garbage. Soon it will belong to the rich. Oh, no. Oh, wow. It's going to go to the rich people, guys. But again, going back to our theme, you can see what's going on here. For very obvious reasons, leftists are inventing dumb excuses to oppose space travel because fundamentally, space travel represents excellence and leftists hate anything that represents excellence. Let me put it that simply. So with all of that said, we of course have to speak about Victor Glover, who is the black astronaut on this mission, and the media is trying to really push this idea about how he's, the black DEI astronaut. And take a listen to his response here to CNN, because I actually thought it was quite interesting.
It is a big question, and I want to highlight, I guess, maybe one facet of this is the tension, I call it. I live in this, this dichotomy between happiness that a young woman can look at Christina and just physicalize her passion or her interest, or even if it's not something she wants to do, she can just be like girl power, and that's awesome. And that young brown boys and girls can look at me and go, hey, he looks like me and he's doing what? And that's great. I love that. But I also hope we are pushing the other direction, that one day we don't have to talk about these first, that one day this is just, and I listen to this, that this is the human history. It's about human history. It's the story of humanity, not black history, not women's history, but that it becomes human history.
I mean, exactly, right? And what Victor Glover, who, by the way, is a military veteran, a great father, an astronaut, an exceptional guy in all regards, a great American, right? What he's trying to say is that I don't want this to be I don't want to be known as like the black astronaut or something like that. You know, I want to be known as the astronaut. It's not black history, it's human history, which logically you would think is true. But of course, I suppose that if the left can't find any other winning direction to oppose the space program from, that's what they're going to do, right? They're going to suddenly start to claim all of this stuff. They're going to say, see, it's not a victory for America or even humanity or technological progress. It's really a victory for DEI. That's the biggest story of Artemis, right? Not the fact that America is going to the moon for the first time since the 1970s and since the leftists ruined the space program, right? No. Now it's diverse, guys. Are they going to plant an LGBT flag on the moon? Is that what the leftists want? That's one small step for black people. What? But, you know, these people ruin everything. What else can we say, you know? Can't even talk about a freaking rocket launch without talking about diversity. But anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.